Have you ever stopped to ask yourself what your investment returns actually are after tax? Most people don't. And the numbers that we hear quoted are before tax. They tell us what the market did, but they don't tell us what you got to keep. But there's new research that was just published last month, May of 2026, that gives an answer to this question. It's based on 100 years of data, and the answer is very significant to your plan. So I want to tell you what the research shows, how it applies to you, and why I believe tax planning is the most important thing you can do for your retirement plan right now. Now, if we haven't met, my name is Liz Whittaberry. I'm a retirement-focused financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors. And I want to talk in today's video about three key things. One is, how much is taxes actually costing you? Number two, where is that showing up? And number three, what does good tax planning look like? What are the things that you can be doing to improve your situation? Let's start by talking about the research. It was done by Andrew Ng, who is a former Columbia Business School professor. He used to work for BlackRock. Now he runs his own company. He's written 100 plus papers. And what he set out to do was determine what did investors actually keep. So he looked at all of the years of market returns from 1926 to 2025, and he analyzed what investors would have kept based on the actual tax rates in effect each and every year. Sounds like a mammoth project, but it's very beneficial to us because we can now see what was that impact. He divided it into 30-year rolling periods, and over the most recent 30-year period, the market average was 9.91%. After taxes, the investor would have kept 8.26%. That's a 1.65% difference each and every year on average over that 30-year period. Now, that doesn't sound necessarily like a whole lot, but over time it can really compound. He showed that if somebody had started with $475,000, roughly today's dollars, back in the beginning of the time period, 1996, that fast forward all the way to 2025, if there were no taxes to be paid, that would have grown to 8.1 million. But because there were taxes to be paid that was costing roughly 1.65%, it actually grew to 5.1 million. That roughly 3 million difference is the tax drag. When you think about that 3 million reduction for taxes, could have been 8.1 million, was 5.1 million, that is about 36%. That is a big difference. Whether you have 2 million or 20 million or anything in between, that is not a rounding error. That is why tax planning is so important, so key right now. Now, that recent 30-year period is actually a low tax environment historically for the nation. We've had a lot of tax law come into place after the 70s that have reduced our taxes. Prior to, in earlier periods, taxes were much higher. The highest 30-year period was from 1936 to 1965, and that tax drag was 5.38%. The average was 3.47%, so about double what it is currently. Now, I find that interesting because we're in this low tax environment, but we also have some of the highest government debt that we've had in a long time. And so we don't have any guarantee that we're going to continue to be in a low tax environment. So what that tells me is that this is a significant planning opportunity. Now is the time that we need to be focused on it. And that is why tax planning is the most important thing that you can be doing. A lot of times investors focus on the fees. What are the fees being paid? And fees have significantly come down. Fees used to be much higher. Now taxes have become the big expense to your portfolio. And That's why we want to focus on that in today's video. So let's talk about where this tax cost actually shows up. And I want to make the point that you need to start thinking about it this year. Each year you wait, you lose the opportunity to take advantage of the current low environment or any opportunity that you have in this year. You can't go backwards in time to take advantage of that later. Once the year is over, you've missed it. And so you want to take advantage of it, start this year looking at your tax plan. There's a limited amount of tax work that can be done in any one year. It compounds and grows over time. So you've got to get started this year. So let's first talk about where do these tax costs show up. I want to focus on the 4 key areas that the research paper talked about, but there are other key areas that I work with my clients on. But we're going to look at these key areas that were in the research paper and talk about how they impact your plan. The first key area was dividends. Now, dividends was the dominant driver of tax costs over the whole 100 years period, but in recent years that has changed because in 2003, the tax law changed. Dividends used to be taxed as ordinary income no matter what. And now, if it's a qualified dividend, so there's some rules around that, a U.S. company, you've held the stock for a certain period of time, then that dividend qualifies for capital gains tax rates, which is a preferential rate, and that significantly reduces the cost on that dividend income. A second key area in the research was, where's the asset located? Do you have the tax efficient assets in that taxable account and the tax inefficient assets in a different account that's going to shelter that tax inefficiency, such as in your IRA or in a Roth IRA? The difference between having that tax inefficient asset in your taxable account versus a account where it's sheltered is significant. That can add up to 0.5%, 1% of additional tax cost each year. The third key area is the investment structure of the investment itself. Are you purchasing exchange traded funds or mutual funds? What is that investment structure? Exchange traded funds were created to provide tax efficiency, and the research showed that by utilizing tax efficient exchange traded funds instead of mutual funds in those taxable accounts, that saves 0.25% to 0.5% in tax cost over that 30-year period. So again, that in and of itself doesn't sound significant, but it compounds and it adds up on top of the other key areas. And then the final key area that was talked about in the paper is the step up in basis. And what that is referring to is the fact that if you have embedded gains, you have capital gains that you've never paid the tax on in a taxable account. When you pass away and that goes to your heirs, they get a step up in that basis to the fair market value of the asset at that time. So if you bought something for, say, $100,000 and it's grown to $1 million, and you have $900,000 of capital gains that you would have to pay tax on if you wanted to liquidate that asset, if you are leaving it to your heirs, when they inherit it, their basis is now the $1 million that it's worth. They can sell it for the $1 million and they have no tax. That is the step up in basis. And that is very significant. So if you are older and you're not needing to spend these assets and you can leave them to your heirs, then it makes sense to allow that step up in basis to happen. Now, these 4 key areas interact with each other. Anything that you do with your retirement portfolio in one area is going to impact what happens in another area. And so you want to think about all of your accounts together. You want to think about everything that you're doing as a cohesive plan, not just one isolated decision over here and another isolated decision over there, because what happens is those isolated decisions are not isolated and they are going to have an impact on what happens in the other parts of your portfolio. And so you've got to have a coordinated retirement plan to pull it all together. And that is where good tax planning comes into play. Good tax planning is not just filing your tax return. Good tax planning is looking at your current situation, looking ahead to the future years and saying, what is my income? What are my assets? What is the growth on those assets? What is the kind of assets and where are they located? What's my spending? What are my goals? What are all the things that could happen over my lifetime? And how then does my taxes flow through that plan? You want to look at your tax plan over the whole period and then each year as you go along. In order to know what's the best thing to do this year, you've got to have that full plan in front of you so that you can prioritize. Like I said earlier, there is always a limited amount of tax planning that you can do each year. The best way to approach it is to look each year at your tax bracket. How much room do you have, and what are the things that you can do? You can consider Roth conversions. You can consider shifting assets so that you have the tax-efficient assets in the taxable account. You can look at, do you need to shift out of some funds that have a higher tax cost just because of the way they're designed? Shift into some funds that have a lower tax cost because they are designed more tax efficiently. Look at all of the different opportunities you have for that year, and again, decide which things make the most sense based on the long-term tax plan. Realize that if you make a shift from, say, an IRA to a Roth IRA, you're settling up on taxes at a known tax rate. You know what the cost is going to be, as opposed to, well, you don't know in the future what that cost might be. When you shift assets from a tax inefficient location to a tax efficient location, or you shift what those assets are, you're again making a change that is going to impact not just this year, but all of the years ahead of you. When you do charitable giving, you want to make sure that you do it in a way that you really get a tax benefit for it. There are ways that you can structure that to get the most benefit for the charitable giving that you're doing. And always have in mind what's going to happen when you're not here, what's the cost that your heirs are going to pay. Look at all of that together. And like I said earlier, it's important to do it every year because it compounds over time. What you do this year is the foundation for what you can do next year. And that's the foundation for what you can do the year after. So you want to make sure that you are taking action each and every year, looking at it from a strategic point of view, making a plan, and taking action. And if you don't have a plan, then I encourage you to work with a financial advisor that prioritizes tax planning. You want to work with somebody that understands this area and that can help you prioritize the things that are going to make the biggest difference for you, your heirs, your goals, all of the things that you want to have happen. Tax planning is very central to the planning that I'm doing with my clients. And if you're interested in what that looks like and wondering how I work and whether that might be a fit for your situation, you can head over to my website at www.bestpathadvisors.com, and there you'll find some good information that lets you know how I work, what I do, who I do my best work for. And if it looks like it's a fit, you can schedule a time to talk while you're there. But whatever you do, get a tax plan, because tax planning cannot be an afterthought. In today's environment, it's got to be front and center. You need a tax plan. You need to make sure that you pay the very least amount of taxes over your lifetime so that you're on your best path for your retirement. And if you're a client listening to this video, first of all, thank you for listening. And I look forward to continuing to work on your tax plan with you over your retirement years so that we can minimize how much you pay, maximize how much you keep.